Narrated by Abdullah bin Abu Qatada. My father set out for Mecca in the year of Al-Hudaybiyah, and his companions assumed ihram, but he did not. At that time the Prophet peace be upon him was informed that an enemy wanted to attack him, so the Prophet peace be upon him proceeded onwards. While my father was among his companions, some of them laughed among themselves. My father said, I looked up and saw an onager. I attacked, stabbed, and caught it. I then sought my companions' help, but they refused to help me. Later we all ate its meat. We were afraid that we might be left behind, separated, from the Prophet peace be upon him, so I went in search of the Prophet peace be upon him, and made my horse to run at a galloping speed at times, and let it go slow at an ordinary speed at other times, till I met a man from the tribe of Bani Gifar at midnight. I asked him, Where did you leave the Prophet peace be upon him? He replied, I left him at Tahun, and he had the intention of having the midday rest at As-Sakiyah. I followed the trace and joined the Prophet peace be upon him and said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, your people, companions, send you their compliments, and ask for Allah's blessings upon you. They are afraid lest they may be left behind, so please wait for them. I added, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, I hunted an onager and some of its meat is with me. The Prophet peace be upon him told the people to eat it, though all of them were in the state of ihram. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abu Qatada. That his father said, we proceeded with the Prophet peace be upon him in the year of Al-Hudaybiyah, and his companions assumed ihram, but I did not. We were informed that some enemies were at Gaika, and so we went on towards them. My companions saw an onager and some of them started laughing among themselves. I looked and saw it. I chased it with my horse and stabbed and caught it. I wanted some help from my companions, but they refused. I slaughtered it all alone. We all ate from its meat. Then I followed Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, lest we should be left behind. At times I urged my horse to run at a galloping speed, and at other times at an ordinary slow speed. On the way I met a man from the tribe of Bani Gifar at midnight. I asked him where he had left Allah's Messenger peace be upon him. The man replied that he had left the Prophet peace be upon him at a place called Tahun, and he had the intention of having the midday rest at As-Sakiyah. So I followed Allah's Messenger peace be upon him till I reached him and said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, I have been sent by my companions, who send you their greetings and compliments and ask for Allah's mercy and blessings upon you. They were afraid lest the enemy might intervene between you and them, so please wait for them. So he did. Then I said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, we have hunted an onager and have some of it, its meat, left over. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him told his companions to eat the meat, although all of them were in a state of ihram. Narrated by Abu Qatada. We were in the company of the Prophet peace be upon him at a place called Al-Kahha, which is at a distance of 3 stages of journey from Medina. Abu Qatada narrated through another group of narrators, we were in the company of the Prophet peace be upon him at a place called Al-Kahha, and some of us had assumed ihram while the others had not. I noticed that some of my companions were watching something, so I looked up and saw an onager. I rode my horse and took the spear and whip, but my whip fell down, and I asked them to pick it up for me, but they said, we will not help you by any means, as we are in a state of ihram. So I picked up the whip myself and attacked the onager from behind a hillock and slaughtered it and brought it to my companions. Some of them said, Eat it. While some others said, Do not eat it. So I went to the Prophet peace be upon him, who was ahead of us, and asked him about it. He replied, Eat it, as it is halal, it is legal to eat it. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abu Qatada. That his father had told him that Allah's Messenger peace be upon him set out for Hajj, and so did his companions. he sent a batch of his companions by another route, and Abu Qatada was one of them. The Prophet peace be upon him said to them, "Proceed along the seashore till we meet all together." So they took the route of the seashore, and when they started all of them assumed ihram except Abu Qatada. While they were proceeding on, his companions saw a group of onagers. Abu Qatada chased the onagers and attacked and wounded a shinager. They got down and ate some of its meat and said to each other, "How do we eat the meat of the game while we are in a state of ihram?" So they, carried the rest of the she-onager's meat, and when they met Allah's Messenger peace be upon him they asked, saying, "O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, we assumed ihram with the exception of Abu Qatada, and we saw a group of onagers. Abu Qatada attacked them and wounded a she-onager from them. Then we got down and ate from its meat. Later we said, to each other, how do we eat the meat of the game and we are in a state of ihram? So we carried the rest of its meat." The Prophet asked, "Did any one of you order Abu Qatada to attack it or point at it?" They replied in the negative. He said, "Then eat what is left of its meat." Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas. From As-Sa'b bin Jathama al-Laythi that the latter presented an onager to Allah's Messenger peace be upon him while he was at Al-Abwa or at Wadan, and he refused it. On noticing the signs of some unpleasant feeling of disappointment on his, As-Sa'b's, face, the Prophet peace be upon him said to him, "I have only returned it because I am muhrim." Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him said, "It is not sinful of a muhrim to kill 5 kinds of animals." One of the wives of the Prophet peace be upon him narrated. The Prophet peace be upon him said, "A muhrim can kill 5 kinds of animals." Narrated by Hafsa. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him said, "It is not sinful of a muhrim to kill 5 kinds of animals, namely, the crow, the kite, the mouse, the scorpion, and the rabid dog." Narrated by Aisha. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him said, 5 kinds of animals are harmful and could be killed in the haram, sanctuary. These are, the crow, the kite, the scorpion, the mouse, and the rabid dog. Narrated by Abdullah. While we were in the company of the Prophet peace be upon him in a cave at Mina, when Surat wal-Mursalat were revealed and he recited it and I heard it, directly, from his mouth as soon as he recited its revelation. Suddenly a snake sprang at us and the Prophet peace be upon him said, "Ordered us kill it." We ran to kill it but it escaped quickly. The Prophet peace be upon him said, "It has escaped your evil and you too have escaped its evil." Narrated by Aisha the wife of the Prophet. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him called the salamander a bad animal, but I did not hear him ordering it to be killed. Narrated by Said bin Abu Said al-Makbari. Abu Shurayh, al-Ada'i said that he had said to Amr bin Said when he was sending the troops to Mecca, to fight Abdullah bin Az-Zubair, "O chief, allow me to tell you what Allah's Messenger peace be upon him said on the day following the conquest of Mecca. My ears heard that and my heart understood it thoroughly, and I saw with my own eyes the Prophet peace be upon him when he, after glorifying and praising Allah, started saying, 'Allah, not the people, made Mecca a sanctuary, so anybody who has belief in Allah and the last day should neither shed blood in it, nor should he cut down its trees. If anybody argues, that fighting in it is permissible on the basis that Allah's Messenger peace be upon him did fight in Mecca, say to him, Allah allowed his apostle and did not allow you. Allah allowed me only for a few hours on that day of the conquest, and today its sanctity is valid as it was before. So those who are present should inform those who are absent, concerning this fact." Abu Shurayh was asked, "What did Amr reply?" He said, "Amr said, O Abu Shurayh, I know better than you in this respect. Mecca does not give protection to a sinner, a murderer, or a thief. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet peace be upon him said, Allah has made Mecca a sanctuary, so it was a sanctuary before me and will continue to be a sanctuary after me. It was made legal for me, I was allowed to fight in it, for a few hours of a day. It is not allowed to uproot its shrubs or to cut its trees, or to chase, or disturb, its game, or to pick up its luqata, fallen things, except by a person who would announce that, what he has found publicly. Al-Abbas said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him. Except al-idkar, a kind of grass, for it is used, by our goldsmiths and for our graves. The Prophet peace be upon him then said, except al-idkar. Ikrimah said, do you know what chasing or disturbing the game means? It means driving it out of the shade to occupy its place. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. On the day of the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet peace be upon him said, there is no more emigration from Mecca, but jihad and intentions, and whenever you are called for jihad, you should go immediately. No doubt, Allah has made this place, Mecca, a sanctuary since the creation of the heavens and the earth and will remain a sanctuary till the day of resurrection as Allah has ordained its sanctity. Fighting was not permissible in it for anyone before me, and even for me it was allowed only for a portion of a day. So it is a sanctuary with Allah's sanctity till the day of resurrection. Its thorns should not be uprooted and its game should not be chased, and its luqata, fallen things, should not be picked up except by one who would announce that publicly, and its vegetation, grass etc., should not be cut. Al-Abbas said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him. Except al-idkar, for it is used by their blacksmiths and for their domestic purposes. So the Prophet peace be upon him said, except al-idkar. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him was cupped while he was in a state of ihram. Narrated by Ibn Buayna. The Prophet, while in the state of ihram, was cupped at the middle of his head at Liha Jamal. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet peace be upon him married Ma'imuna while he was in the state of ihram, only the ceremonies of marriage were held. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. A person stood up and asked, O Allah's Apostle, what clothes may be worn in the state of ihram? The Prophet peace be upon him replied, do not wear a shirt or trousers, or any headgear, a turban, or a hooded cloak, but if somebody has no shoes he can wear leather stockings provided they are cut short off the ankles, and also, do not wear anything perfumed with wars or saffron, and the murima, a woman in the state of ihram, should not cover her face, or wear gloves. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. A man was crushed to death by his she-camel and was brought to Allah's Messenger peace be upon him who said, give him a bath and shroud him, but do not cover his head, and do not bring any perfume near to him, as he will be resurrected reciting Talbiyah. Narrated by Abdullah bin Hunan. Abdullah bin al-Abbas and al-Miswar bin Makrama differed at al-Abway. Ibn Abbas said that a murim could wash his head, while al-Miswar maintained that he should not do so. Abdullah bin Abbas sent me to Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and I found him bathing between the two wooden posts of the well, and was screened with a sheet of cloth. I greeted him and he asked who I was. I replied, I am Abdullah bin Hunan and I have been sent to you by Ibn Abbas to ask you how Allah's Messenger peace be upon him used to wash his head while in the state of ihram. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari caught hold of the sheet of cloth and lowered it till his head appeared before me, and then told somebody to pour water on his head. He poured water on his head, and he, Abu Ayyub, rubbed his head with his hands by bringing them from back to front and from front to back and said, I saw the Prophet peace be upon him doing like this. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. I heard the Prophet peace be upon him delivering a sermon at Arafat saying, if a Murim does not find slippers, he could wear cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather, but he has to cut short the cuffs below the ankles, and if he does not find an izar, a waist sheet for wrapping the lower half of the body, he could wear trousers. Narrated by Abdullah. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him was asked what sort of clothes a Murim should wear. He replied, he should not wear a shirt, turbans, trousers, a hooded cloak, or a dress perfumed with saffron or wars, and if slippers are not available he can wear cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather, but he should cut them so that they reach below the ankles. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet peace be upon him delivered a sermon at Arafat and said, whoever does not get an izar can wear trousers, and whoever cannot get a pair of shoes can wear cuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. Narrated by Al-Bara. The Prophet peace be upon him assumed ihram for Umrah in the month of Dhul Qa'dah, but the pagan people of Mecca refused to admit him into Mecca till he agreed on the condition that he would not bring into Mecca any arms but sheathed. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet peace be upon him fixed Dhul Hulayfa as the miqat, the place for assuming ihram, for the people of Medina, and Quran al-Manatzil for the people of Najd, and Yalamlam for the people of Yemen. These mawaqit are for those people and also for those who come through these mawaqit, from places other than the above mentioned, with the intention of performing Hajj and Umrah. And those living inside these mawaqit can assume ihram from the place where they start, even the people of Mecca can assume ihram from Mecca. Narrated by Anas bin Malik. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him entered Mecca in the year of its conquest wearing an Arabian helmet on his head, and when the Prophet peace be upon him took it off, a person came and said, Ibn Qatl is holding the covering of the Kaaba, taking refuge in the Kaaba. The Prophet peace be upon him said, kill him. Narrated by Ali. While I was with Allah's Messenger peace be upon him there came to him a man wearing a cloak having a trace of yellowish perfume or a similar thing on it. Umar used to say to me, would you like to see the Prophet peace be upon him at the time when he is inspired divinely? So it happened that he was inspired, then, and when the inspiration was over the Prophet peace be upon him said to that man, do in your Umrah the same as you do in your Hajj. A man bit the hand of another man, but in that process the latter broke one incisor tooth of the former, and the Prophet peace be upon him forgave the latter. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. While a man was standing with the Prophet peace be upon him at Arafat, he fell from his mount and his neck was crushed by it. The Prophet peace be upon him said, wash the deceased with water and sidra and shroud him in 2 pieces of cloth, and neither perfume him nor cover his head, for Allah will resurrect him on the day of resurrection and he will be reciting Talbiyah. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. While a man was standing with the Prophet peace be upon him at Arafat, he fell from his mount and his neck was crushed by it. The Prophet peace be upon him said, wash the deceased with water and sidra and shroud him in 2 pieces of cloth, and neither perfume him nor cover his head, for Allah will resurrect him on the day of resurrection and he will be reciting Talbiyah. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. A man was in the company of the Prophet peace be upon him and his she-camel crushed his neck while he was in a state of ihram and he died. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him said, wash him with water and sidra and shroud him in his 2 garments, neither perfume him nor cover his head, for he will be resurrected on the day of resurrection, reciting Talbiyah. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. A woman from the tribe of Juhana came to the Prophet peace be upon him and said, my mother had vowed to perform Hajj but she died before performing it. May I perform Hajj on my mother's behalf? The Prophet peace be upon him replied, perform Hajj on her behalf. Had there been a debt on your mother, would you have paid it or not? So pay Allah's debt as he has more right to be paid. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. A woman from the tribe of Kitham came in the year of Hajjat al-Wada of the Prophet peace be upon him, and said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him. My father has come under Allah's obligation of performing Hajj but he is a very old man and cannot sit properly on his mount. Will the obligation be fulfilled if I perform Hajj on his behalf? The Prophet peace be upon him replied in the affirmative. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas. Al-Fadl was riding behind the Prophet peace be upon him and a woman from the tribe of Kitham came up. Al-Fadl started looking at her and she looked at him. The Prophet peace be upon him turned Al-Fadl's face to the other side. She said, my father has come under Allah's obligation of performing Hajj but he is a very old man, and cannot sit properly on his mount. Shall I perform Hajj on his behalf? The Prophet peace be upon him replied in the affirmative. That happened during Hajjat al-Wada of the Prophet peace be upon him. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas. Al-Fadl was riding behind the Prophet peace be upon him and a woman from the tribe of Kitham came up. Al-Fadl started looking at her and she looked at him. The Prophet peace be upon him turned Al-Fadl's face to the other side. She said, my father has come under Allah's obligation of performing Hajj but he is very old man and cannot sit properly on his rahila, mount. Shall I perform Hajj on his behalf? The Prophet peace be upon him replied affirmative. That happened during Hajjat al-Wada of the Prophet peace be upon him. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet peace be upon him sent me to Mina with the luggage from Jam, al-Muzdalifah, at night. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas. I came riding on my she-ass and had, just then attained the age of puberty. Allah's Messenger peace be upon him was praying at Mina. I passed in front of a part of the first row and then dismounted from it, and the animal started grazing. I aligned with the people behind Allah's Messenger peace be upon him. The sub-narrator added that happened in Mina during the Prophet's Hajjat al-Wada. Narrated by As-Saib bin Yazid. While in the company of my parents, I was made to perform Hajj with Allah's Messenger peace be upon him and I was a 7-year-old boy then. Narrated by Al-Juwayd bin Abdurrahman. I heard Umar bin Abdul Aziz telling about As-Saib bin Yazid that he had performed Hajj, while carried with the belongings of the Prophet. Narrated by Ibrahim's grandfather that Umar in his last Hajj allowed the wives of the Prophet peace be upon him to perform Hajj, and he sent with them Uthman bin Affan and Abdurrahman bin Auf as escorts. Narrated by Aisha, mother of the faithful believers. I said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him. Shouldn't we participate in holy battles and jihad along with you? He replied, the best and the most superior jihad for women is Hajj which is accepted by Allah. Aisha added, ever since I heard that from Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, I have determined not to miss Hajj. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet peace be upon him said, a woman should not travel except with a Jumarum, her husband or a man with whom that woman cannot marry at all according to the Islamic jurisprudence, and no man may visit her except in the presence of a Jumarum. A man got up and said, O Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, I intend to go to such and such an army and my wife wants to perform Hajj. The Prophet peace be upon him said to him, go along with her to Hajj. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. When the Prophet peace be upon him returned after performing his Hajj, he asked Sinan al-Ansari, what did forbid you to perform Hajj? She replied, father of so-and-so, her husband, had 2 camels and he performed Hajj on one of them, and the second is used for the irrigation of our land. The Prophet peace be upon him said to her, perform Umrah in the month of Ramadan, as it is equivalent to Hajj or Hajj with me in reward. Narrated by Kayza the slave of Ziyad. Abu Said, who participated in 12 Ghazawat with the Prophet peace be upon him, said, I heard 4 things from Allah's Messenger peace be upon him, or I narrate them from the Prophet peace be upon him, which won my admiration and appreciation. They are, 1. No lady should travel without her husband or without a Humaram for a 2 days journey. 2. No fasting is permissible on 2 days of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. 3. No prayer may be offered after 2 prayers, after the Asr prayer till the sun set and after the morning prayer till the sun rises. 4. Not to travel for visiting, except for 3 mosques, Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, my mosque in Medina, and Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. Narrated by Anas. The Prophet peace be upon him saw an old man walking, supported by his 2 sons, and asked about him. The people informed him that he had vowed to go on foot to the Kaaba. He said, Allah is not in need of this old man's torturing himself, and ordered him to ride. Narrated by Uqba bin Amir. My sister vowed to go on foot to the Kaaba, and she asked me to take the verdict of the Prophet peace be upon him about it. So I did, and the Prophet peace be upon him said, she should walk and also should ride.